two things that have done so much damage in the world right now. Number one, smartphones. And number two, fast foods. So these two things essentially have hacked what makes things addictive to us humans and have weaponized that to, make us use more of it. And I know this because, I've done exactly the same thing in my past life, using products that get people hooked. Now, when I say that, I mean in terms of hacking user behavior so they spend more money or spend more time inside your game, like mobile game or something like that. The inherent psychology of this is just plain evil. It's kind of like gambling. All those fucking games, But this one is like, it's just crazy. They're just hacking the dopamine mechanism. With fast food, they do, by adding things like maltodextrin, high fructose corn syrup, things that jacks up your glycemic index, carbs after carbs, sugar after sugar, a lot of MSGs, a lot of sodium. It kind of like makes you want to keep eating. And, your brain release like a dopamine as a result. The same thing with social media. They show you these really small clips with clickbaity things, especially these days. If you go on Instagram, it's just crazy. You see women showing their asses, promoting their OnlyFans content, like women showing their asses to some people dying, to somebody having a massive accident, and vice versa. Same thing with TikTok. And you see these things, you keep scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling, and all of a sudden, you're addicted. And people do it for such a long time that they lose not just a sense of time, but the sense of their goals, and things are not happening in their lives. They're unable to accomplish anything. They're unhappy. They're making less money. Their relationship suffers. They don't have time for things, right? They don't have time to work on themselves. Their perspective shifts from all this as well. And the fast food, jacks up your weight, it jacks up your blood sugar, it jacks up your, blood pressure, all kinds of nasty things happen. I wanted to create this episode to just talk about this. And everybody knows that these things are bad. There's been literature on this. Even the companies that makes these things knows that this is bad. If not, they wouldn't have warnings on their thing. I think iPhone has changed the world, but it has destroyed a lot of lives as well. So I don't know how to say this, but my life was much better before iPhone. I'm old enough to remember the time before iPhone came out. But at the same time, my life is amazing because of iPhone. I can do amazing things. I can order food at 3 a.m. right now and have it delivered at my house from a lot of restaurants. Now, me being in Bangkok has a lot more to do with this. Okay, that is important. It has also revolutionized things like Google Translate, the taxi scammers. You got a map and a GPS in your hand. It's just amazing. But, the companies that have used smartphones to weaponize addiction, to keep using these apps, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well, they have done a lot of damage. There is an amazing book called Hooked by Nir Eyal. How do you say it? And he talks about it, like how to use systems to kind of hook people up, like short feedbacks, positive feedback loop. He talks about all these things I've done in my life in the past. I mean, we were working on designing these social games. We had these things. So we figured out a long time ago because, we were just like, okay, what is it that we can do to keep people spending as much time as possible in our games? So we would come up with these strategies on how to get them hooked, and it's crazy. I look back and I'm like, oh, geez, I was too young and stupid. But hey, we made a lot of money doing those things. So I know the psychology of what makes people hooked. I know this, especially when it comes to digital content. I'm not talking about substance. So it's important to reflect in this episode on what is it that you can do to stop this. Everybody knows this is terrible. Everybody knows that these kinds of social media apps and these products and even fast foods, anything that jacks up or like hacks your dopamine system to get you hooked on their products is terrible. Everybody knows that. So what are we going to do about this? So first of all, we have to establish some truths, right? And one of them is you are not, absolutely not missing out on anything if you stop using social media, if you stop using X or Reddit or Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, whatever. You're absolutely not missing out on anything, right? Now, of course, there are communities. I remember back in the days, we used to have forums. It was a lot more fun. You would go out in these forums and there were discussions and, it was like a niche thing. I think we still have some of those elements preserved in Discord chat rooms. So that is interesting. Reddit communities do still have some of those things, but you really have to stay away from the r/all or the homepage or the front page or popular page. You just want to go to your specific community. And, it's like better that way, in my opinion. Look, you can't go cold turkey on social media. That is just going to be a terrible strategy. So instead, I would recommend selecting your hobby, and like only going to those places where people with those particular hobbies hang out. So that would be, say, for example, your hobby is pro wrestling. You could go to Squared Circle subreddit and hang out over there. Or maybe find a community on X or on Discord and hang out over there. Say your hobby is reading. You can, stick to reading specific groups, forums, communities, vice versa. And you're going to get a lot more value out of your online time that way. And with popular social media, I don't think anything has ever impacted me in a way where like, okay, you know what? I wish I was on social media so I would have known about this. Never in my entire life that has ever happened to me. So yeah, and look, if it's like super huge, important thing, you learn about it from places like New York Times or Washington Post or Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or whatever you're using to get your news. Or if you're not using any of them, you might see them on Google News when you open the Google search app or something like that. You'll see those things. That's the point. So you're not missing out on anything. So let's just establish this one truth. Now, let's move on to what else you can do. I was reading just yesterday that people's reading, like people, mostly kids, are not reading anymore. And they don't care about reading. I was wondering, why is it? And why is it that people are no longer reading? Mostly kids and millennials, not millennials, I'm so sorry, Gen Zs. And I think it has a lot to do with social media and the attention span of this economy that we're living in, where most of the content that you see online everywhere is short form. So people have conditioned their brain to not pay attention for longer durations of time. And they're going to suffer as a result. And they were talking about this, study where a lot of these people were having issues with the law and order. They were unable to learn new skills. They were unable to get jobs. And many of them were still living with their parents. So we have to ask ourselves, why is it, right? And the answer is obvious. It's the social media. And I got to be honest, it has also affected me in the past because I was one of the people who got on the wine trend really quickly. And if you remember wine, it was just 5-second videos. And I enjoyed it a lot. I really thought that was like a really good, like a content platform. I made some content over there as well, made a bunch of money. It was fine. It was cool, but it was destructive to mental health of people who were making that content as well as consuming that content, and things have never been the same since then. The same can be said about Twitter or X, just artist formerly known as Twitter. With its short form content, people are no longer reading large form content or long form content. And because of that, their attention spans are suffering. It has screwed up our dopamine system. We expect rewards from a lot of different things. And we do it so often, so frequently that, things don't seem right unless we pick up our phone and just get those dopamine hits. So, and that is especially true if that's the first thing you do in the morning, or if you do one of those things before or at the gym. So you would not engage with yourself at the gym. You're also going to have issues with things like finding motivation to do any of those things you want to do. So let's talk about how to beat this. Let's talk about some strategies on how to detox yourself and how to stop with how to find motivation. Like, the primary thing with this is that it has screwed over our concentration as well as our motivation. Let's talk about how to get concentration back first, and then we'll talk about how you can use dopamine detox to get your motivation back. As with everything, the first step is to make a commitment that, okay, I'm going to start detoxing myself. This is not good for me. And once you do that, it kind of prime your brain for what's about to happen. Because your brain is used to getting all these different dopamine hits from different sources. Once you deprive your brain of those things, well, it's not going to like it. So you're going to be constantly pressured to go back to your ways, to go back to your smartphones, to go back to consuming these, dopamine-rich things, just so you can get a really quick hit. So that is the first step. The second step would be to embrace uncertainty. Many times when you're using smartphones, you're pulled back into using it because you're afraid of uncertainty. So you want to be constantly updated on what's going on in the world. And on top of that, you're constantly pressured into, going back and checking status of your friends. There's a lot of envy over there, looking into other people's, lives and whatever. So you got to embrace the uncertainty. Next step would be to detach yourself from whatever that's going on around the world. You might be anxious about the positives and the negatives of whatever that's going on in your life, at your work, at your office, in your country. And you have to detach yourself from those scenarios, right? Unless it's directly under your control. And I mean directly under your control. You have to detach yourself from those things. And because those things that are happening in the world are not you, they may kind of sort of indirectly affect you in some way, shape, or form, but you shouldn't really attach yourself from those things because you didn't do any of those things, right? So there's just no reason for you to attach yourself. Okay, bad things happen in the world. Like, okay, cool. Can I do something about it directly? Yes, great, let's do it. Is that a hypothetical thing that I can't really do anything about? Well, then, what's the use of wasting your energy worrying about things that are outside of your control? So you have to detach yourself from the situation. The last step would be, you might feel like there's a lot of anxiety, the walls are closing in, I have a lot of stuff on my plate, I have a lot of things that I have to do. So instead of tackling the whole thing, just pull back and see the big picture and try to make one small step forward in that direction. When you do that, it kind of gives you a really tiny positive reinforcement that, okay, things are not as horrible as as they seem, because I'm moving forward and there is some progress that's happening. And look, success is all about making those tiny increments, and you'll reach there in time. You can't just do one thing and it's just all going to be all fine and fancy. And like, even if you're like, say, for example, you got a notice from, say, IRS, and you have to reply to them, right? You have to it seems like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my house. There's probably going to be a penalty of $300,000. I don't have that kind of money. So you might say, okay, what is it that I can do about it? First step, get your receipts in order. Second step, call a lawyer and a CPA or both. Step 3, give them all the information you have. Step 4, send the reply back. And then that's the best you can do. Break your tasks, like whatever that's like something that's like eating you up or something massive in your life that's consuming you. You have to just look at the big picture, go back, just zoom out and say, okay, this is what it looks like. I am not my problems, but I will respond to this problem in a small incremental way. And if it's a hypothetical problem, like hypothetical problems are like not really something that's directly in your control. You can't just go out there and solve them right now. It's one of those things that may or may not happen. So it's one of those things where it's just no use wasting your energy on these things because they may or may not happen. So you might end up wasting your time worrying about things you can't really do anything about right now. So you just face them. You're like, okay, bad things could happen, hypothetically. I can't do anything about it. So let's just not waste my energy and resources on these things. Well, that are not in my control. I can't really do anything about it. So that is how you do it. So when you apply all these different strategies of cutting down your screen time, not giving into dopamine heavy activities, right? Like, not like doing too many activities that triggers dopamine, especially when you're doing something difficult, right? So for example, Andrew Huberman talks about like not listening to music that you like in the gym. Now, you might be some of the music playing in the background. You can't really do anything about it, but just focus on the activity that you're doing in the gym. Same thing with like running or whatever. Instead of just distracting yourself from the difficult thing that you're doing, give into it. And the reward that you're going to, get after you finish it is just going to be incredible. I'm not really sure how the neural pathways work in this case or in this scenario, but you can watch Huberman explain this in more depth. I think it's really enlightening. Well, anyway, so that is it for today's episode. I hope you found this interesting. And if you have any questions, just let me know. We're probably going to summarize all the action items because I know I just regurgitated a lot of stuff. And next episode, we're going to try to summarize everything and bring it in order to it. So yeah, check it out next Wednesday. All right, peace. Take care.